Chapter 21 Summer Dreaming. As for the remainder of the school year, this had been quite an interesting time. Steve got banned from the trip as he pushed someone off him, and the other boy made quite a dramatic scene of pretending to be hurt and fainting. Frankly, this kid was not even hurt, and the assistant principal overreacted. After school, Milo was furious and told Ray about what happened with Steve. Ray told Milo that the school probably had the reasons for what they did, and Steve may be leaving out information. Milo did not take too well to this and kind of freaked out, as he knew that authorities could be wrong and found any assumption that authorities as being by default right utterly stupid. A few days later, Milo called Steve as he was out of school for suspension. Steve explained that Neil would be taking him to Six Flags anyways. Margaret and Ray thought this was inappropriate of Neil to do for Steve. At first, Milo told Margaret that she knew the punishment was excessive and unfair. Margaret explained that it did not matter what they thought, as the school chose the punishment and that settles it. For Milo, this was a faulty position that presumed that right and wrong are relative to what people in positions of authority think. This was not considering that students also paid for the trip and are not given their money back if unfairly kicked off. Over Memorial Day weekend, Milo bought Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets on DVD. With the holiday weekend, Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane threw a party on Monday. During the party, Salvatore, Milo, and Matt went for a walk over to the school basketball courts and playground area. Milo had seen some friends from school and wanted to go over and talk to them. Matt would not go over with Milo. That Thursday, Milo had his 8th grade trip to the now closed Six Flags, which had been SeaWorld and Geauga Lake years before it got bought out. Before the trip, Milo, Sean, and Jack formed their group. That morning, the 8th graders met in the auditorium and boarded the buses. On the way up, Milo sat near Sean and Jack. Milo had been pretty far in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and read the chapter The First Task. Milo told Sean and Jack about Steve coming up with his dad. Sean did not believe that Steve would do this, as he thought that Steve would get caught and get in trouble for doing that. Jack laughed about Steve skipping school on detention day just to go to an amusement park, and how the school probably would think that was a stupid excuse. When the 8th graders arrived at Six Flags, they went to the front gate to go through the check-in. Milo noticed that Roxana was held back and had her bags checked. Milo wondered if there had been some ulterior motive for doing so. The first ride Milo, Sean, and Jack went on was a steel yellow coaster. And then a few rides later, while Milo, Sean, and Jack were waiting in line, Dudley was whining about his group wanting to go on the ride, the X-Flight. One teacher got off the X-Flight looking quite disoriented. By 12 o'clock, the boys got lunch at a sub shop and hit some more rides, including a wooden coaster, a water ride, inverted red roller coaster, and a standing blue roller coaster. After the ride, the boys walked to the bridge from Six Flags to the animal park. This is where SeaWorld was, but had been transformed into a park to include not just sea animals, but tigers also, and some other Asian animals. And on the way to the park, Milo noticed some girls. As it was, Steve's father, Neil, really did take him to Six Flags himself, much to the annoyance of the principals. After getting off a ride, back at the park, Milo noticed Neil talking on the phone, and he said hi to Milo. Jack asked who that was, and Milo explained that was Steve's dad. Jack started laughing quite a bit over that, and Milo thought it was because he thought that Steve's dad was funny looking. Then Milo, Sean, and Jack met up with Steve, who just got out to the bathroom. Frankly, they did not see much of Steve, as he did not go on any rides and preferred the Batman show. Then they went back. Milo and Sean and Jack went back to the SeaWorld, old SeaWorld area and the animal park, and then checked out some penguin exhibits and the shark area. Milo had not seen any of this stuff since he last visited SeaWorld 4 summers ago when they first got the pool. Then the boys waited around as it was near time to leave and were stuck in a Chinese-style gift shop. That Friday, the 8th graders had their first formal dance for 8th graders only. Frankly, the dance was boring, and formals were really just not Milo's thing. Now, Milo never liked school dances in his life. This school dance had like a meat tray, and everybody was dressed all like fancy, and Milo was mostly with Steve during that night. Now, neither Sean nor Jack wanted to go to that dance. At the end of the dance, during the song Friends Forever, Milo caught Ella crying and feared that she might not be attending Cytopon High the next year. Now, Milo had known that Ella might be attending a different school than Cytopon High. As to where, Milo did not know. What really happened was Ella's friend would be attending a different high school, not Ella. That night, Milo watched The Chamber of Secrets and had his attention on the scene where Tom Riddle frames Hagrid and the Weasleys take their flying car over to the Dursleys' house. On Saturday, Margaret and Lydia went for an old girls' day at the Akron Science Center. Milo and Ray likewise got Italian for dinner, and then watched an M. Night Shyamalan movie known as Unbreakable. This is a movie about some types of superheroes who are unable to be destroyed, have some type of supernatural power. Kind of scary, but not really. During Milo's last week in school, he was in the Goblet of Fire chapter, The Yule Ball. That day, the Biancatellos were invited over to the Delaney's for dinner on Friday night. On Friday, before leaving for the Delaney's, Milo was looking through the virtual hymnal website that he visited the summer after 5th grade, and came across a hymn known as Saints of Old Their First Fruits Brought, set to an English folk tune known as Forest Green. At the dinner, Ray told Denise about Steve's dad taking him to Six Flags despite being banned from the trip. Denise said she would never have done what Neil did. Ray admitted that the assistant principal may have overreacted. As for the rest of the dinner, Milo, Lydia, Charlie, and Seamus went downstairs and played on his Sorcerer's Stone game. This game sort of reminded Milo of the Beauty and the Beast castle. The night before the last day of school, Milo had a youth group meeting, which Margaret was a chaperone for. At the youth group, Margaret mentioned both Merrill, Doris, and Steve. After youth group, Ray told Milo, get a good look at William Jetson tomorrow. You won't be seeing this place for a long while. This really hit Milo, as he understood well that he was really done with the school that he had spent 3 years of his life at. As for the last day of school, this was a field day and an awards assembly. After lunch, Principal Hawakan let the 8th graders play on the Hazelnut Forest playground. During field day, Milo saw a little bit of Ella. Milo even let Ella see some pictures from their 8th grade field trip. After school let out, the high school seniors started pelting the middle schoolers with water balloons. That night, Lydia watched some Sister with Tia and Tamara Mori. For dinner, Ray brought home some subs from Subway. Preparations for the Feast of the Guest. Many years had passed. The kobolds had hosted the pregnant Ilfist, ready to give birth to an extraordinary child. The Elfist repaid the kobolds' hospitality by giving them a set of plans for a second story of the structure that created the bridge to the cliff stairs joining Spartustico to Gallicanium. Plus, had it not been for the second story, the kobolds would never have joined in defense and gained glory at defeating the offspring trolls and opening the way to Atlantis. The kobolds had long credited this child to their victory, and the one who would open the door to Atlantis and Spartostica. The festival had not been celebrated since before the hurricane hit, and could only be celebrated when the seer Aegeus arrived to give the say-so. This year, Aegeus came at an odd time, right at the beginning of spring and beginning of the summertide. This summertide was the last season before the kobolds would be spending a term in the city of Atlantica. Aegeus gave instructions to Londinium that the festival was to be celebrated in the gardens of Pedmontis. According to Aegeus' report, a special gift was due to arrive at the cliffs for this feast with a special task. The beginning of summer. Milo had finished 8th grade that June and would be starting high school that coming fall. Milo had been slightly depressed on the first 2 days at having ended middle school so quickly. Milo was not sure who he was anymore and felt a sort of loss of identity. On Milo's first day of summer vacation, Ray gave him a motivational speech about how much he has grown over the past 3 years and that it was only going to get better. Milo did not feel that he could believe this and liked things the way they were. Milo started watching Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone after Ray left for work. That summer, Milo became a bit obsessed with the Harry Potter movies. Later that day, Milo started downloading music from Kazaa. All the music Milo downloaded was Christmas music, being mostly from King's College or the Mormon Tabernacle. Milo's favorite downloads were Good Christian Men Rejoice, which is a loose translation of a poem written by mystic Henry Suso. This other song was Christ Was Born on Christmas Day, which is a loose translation of an old chant known as Risonet in Laudibus. Then there was O Little Town of Bethlehem, set to an English folk tune known as Forest Green, along with O Come Emmanuel by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. On the second day of vacation, Steve came over. Milo took Steve down to the park, and he saw some teachers he remembered from Hazelnut Forest in the parking lot. Milo could not believe how he just graduated middle school and remembered elementary school like it was just yesterday. Then Milo took Steve over to Aunt Jane's to meet Eustace, Samantha, Sylvester, and Aunt Jane. Milo then took Steve over to a neighborhood close to where Uncle Giorgio and Uncle Mike live. Before Ray and Margaret got home, Merle stopped over to pick Steve up. Merle mentioned doing something like Cedar Point over the summer. On Friday, Milo went bowling with Sean in a Friday league they just started. Technically, this was an unofficial league. On Saturday, Ray's work was sponsoring a family evening at the Huntington Center in Toledo. This would include dinner and a basketball game. Now Milo still had quite an obsession with all things Toledo, thanks to the previous year. The Biancatellos headed off to Toledo in the late afternoon and got to the Huntington Center by dinner. The evening served picnic foods like fried chicken, a s'mores bar, and French fries. At the game, Milo noticed a luxury box that reminded him of the hotel where Uncle Giorgio's birthday party was held at almost 2 years ago. Milo remembered how the day before the party he had seen Harry Potter in the Sorcerer's Stone for the first time with the Runcorns. That night, Milo had some strange dreams about his last days of 5th grade, involving someone who was moving and signing a yearbook saying that they would all be together except for this girl. On Sunday, which had been Father's Day, the Biancatellos went to church and out to Perkins for breakfast. That afternoon, there was a picnic at Grant Bertoni's. After the picnic, Milo read some more Harry Potter in the Goblet of Fire. Milo had gotten pretty far, and now was in the chapters about the pensive Mr. Crouch's madness and Padfoot's return. Now Milo was still a bit out of sorts after that weird dream he had about 5th grade in his last days. On Monday, Milo prepared for the school picnic by watching Harry Potter in the Sorcerer's Stone in the morning. That afternoon, Milo and Lydia were at Aunt Jane's with Eustace, Samantha, and Sylvester. Everything that day kept making Milo think about Harry Potter, and for some reason even the backyard reminded him something of Harry Potter, not sure what though. Margaret then took Milo and Lydia out to Taco Bell for dinner. After dinner, Milo watched Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The next day, Milo had his final school picnic at Seawoden. Before leaving, Milo did some more downloading of music and listened to some more hymns, Christmas hymns, before departure for this last school picnic ever. First, Margaret drove over to a clay camp where Lydia was at, and then picked her up, and they were off to Seawoden with Grandma Pearl along with them. When Milo arrived, an acquaintance of his, Jimmy, his name was Jimmy, had been also at the picnic, as his sister's school picnic was that same day. Now, Milo only knew Jimmy from Sunday school. Jimmy's mother asked Milo if he would go on rides with him, as he had no one else to hang around with. Jimmy proved to be a bit annoying to hang around with, as he would not go on any rides with lines. Plus, Jimmy wanted Milo to ask Ella if she would go on rides with him. Now, Jimmy had only known Ella from being at Kinsale, as he could not. He only went to, but he did not go to William Judson, as there was not enough room for him, and he ended up going to Pecan Meadows. After Milo would not have any of this and ditched Jimmy. After ditching Jimmy, Milo came across Doris and Merle. Milo had thought about going to Silktown, but saw clouds coming. Milo then went off with Steve, Doris, and Merle. Milo then came across Ella, and they talked for a good long while, which put him in a good mood for the rest of the outing. The first ride they went on was the Sea Dragon, where Merle was quite comedic. They hit other rides like the roller coaster, the Tilt-A-Whirl, the Scrambler, a log flume, a fun house, a magic carpet, Wipeout, and the Paratrooper. During a short break, Milo ordered an elephant ear. Towards the end, Margaret and Lydia joined Doris, Merle, Steve, and Milo on the Ferris wheel. By this time, Grandma Pearl left as it began starting to rain. Doris tells Margaret that out of all of Steve's friends, Milo is her favorite. Doris tells Margaret how she cannot stand Steve's friends who goes by Dude or that Saul guy. Margaret then invites Milo to spend the night at her trailer, which is not too far from Seaboarding. Milo remembered exactly who Dude was in his hobby of breaking toy cars. Doris also mentioned that she did not like Saul. Milo knew Saul was kind of creepy, and neither did Sean like Saul either. Okay, what happened next? Oh, then the next day, Emma was over, hanging out. Then Steve came over, and he developed a crush on Emma. Now, this had been quite a laugh, considering that Emma would be a senior in high school, while Steve would be a freshman. Seems like Milo has a thing for Bianca at Hello Girls. No, Steve. Steve has a thing for Bianca at Hello Girls. That day, Milo and Steve went for a little walk up into the Jafari's neighborhood. Now the next day, Milo sat in on Lydia, Eustace, Samantha, and their clay camp. Milo had been a bit in a bad mood about not being able to be in clay camp because of the program he was re-signed up with that he was at the previous summer. That Friday, Ray left for another golf trip, and Margaret took Milo and Lydia to see Bruce Almighty. Before Bruce Almighty, they had dinner at Max and Irma's, which started reminding Milo more of that fall that when he first met Amira, thanks in part to them Ray and Milo going to that restaurant sometime during that fall. That weekend, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix came out. Milo looked through the book and found out that Sirius Black had died. Milo did not take this too well, as his favorite book so far was The Prisoner of Azkaban seemed so ruined all of a sudden. Milo then stopped reading The Goblet of Fire as he was too depressed about the outcome with the books. The Bittersweet Festival. This year the Kobolds and Londinians celebrated the feast of the guest at Pedmontis as Azios instructed. The day before the festival, the Kobolds decorated the garden with holly and evergreen wreaths. Legend has it that the holly has the power to ward off Rakshasans, as they are said to hate the smell. Large wreaths were placed on the tables, with smaller wreaths, while smaller wreaths were stored to be given out as mandatory crowns worn by the guests. In the center, the holly with red berries is placed in the middle of the table wreaths. The Aphrodite and bull statue are crowned with the guest wreaths. As soon as the guests from Londinium and Spartustica arrived, Azios declared that this is the great festival of freedom. Azios retold the story of how this child, by the occurrence of a birth, set in motion the great victory over the trolls and became free to enter Atlantica. Azios recounted how had it not been for that second story, the kobolds would never have seen the trolls in the mountain, who made travel between the lands possible. Then the trolls were removed, and the walls of division had been broken. Over the days of feasting, many of the kobolds had looked over the arch that once housed the bridge leading down to the district of the temple. The kobold Erondin had looked with a great sense of nostalgia, as he remembered when they first found the bridge after the Dustonians. He cleaned it out and began to remember the day when they first found this long-lost, forgotten bridge, and invited the Atlanteans to the Harvest Festival. Elrich started to anticipate going through Atlanta in order to get to this temple district in the semester away. What Elrich did not know was that they would have to travel through Atlantica first before ever getting to the temple. During the festival at midnight, there was this joyful song in the air, such as going as such, Night of Sorrow, the mighty bridge once stood, now is gone, morn of joy, the paths through the mountains, night of sorrow, goodbye to the kobolds for a term, morn of joy, alliances will be made, night of sorrow, the battle of the trolls, morn of joy, the celebration of the guest, night of sorrow, the bird shall be slain, morn of joy, the mount of darkness shall be destroyed, night of sorrow, the days of desert wanderings, morn of gladness, return in glory. Then a majestic phoenix flew into the air, into the gardens, whom the celebrants all prostrated before. The phoenix requested that 4 particular kobolds come forth The first kobold, called Origin, got a Reuben chalice intended to keep used as a peace offering in times of conflict before the spirit of revenge takes over. The second kobold, Eusebius, was given a crest from the temple to remind them of their task. The third kobold, Erondin, was given a book of advice written by those who had traveled Atlantica before. The fourth kobold, Zadok, was given an incense burner to fragrance their house they would be staying at. The yearbook picture. Milo went for his final year at that summer camp, but was a bit apprehensive, as the previous year pretty much sucked. Plus Milo had all these bad memories of the summer he first attended the camp, which made him still a bit apprehensive. Milo was a bit angry about being signed up for the program against his will and was insistent that this would be a bad idea. However, this year would prove to be more fun. Milo's counselors were two men who were willing to stick to some particular types of activities instead of being overgeneralized and irritatingly over-educational like last time. Plus the counselors, Rob and Zach, proved to be much more interested in listening to the kids. Now Bob has a daughter, a girl, who is the boy's age and knows quite well how teenagers think. Zach was still in college and remembered being a teenager all too well. What had been established was that the campers, for the most part, liked Harry Potter. For the first week, Milo was a bit skeptical, as he was not sure this would be like the previous year. Within days, they had all kinds of activities that were not so blatantly educational, and actually quite fun. On one occasion, Milo designed a replica of a cruise airplane. That Friday afternoon, Milo had bowling with Sean in his unofficial league. That Saturday, the Delaney's invited the Biancotellos on their boat for the afternoon. Now Milo liked the speed that came with the boats, and Roger was known for going quite fast. After getting back on land, Milo had remembered being at this place after starting 7th grade and before the funeral wake. Milo knew that this was a yacht club. This had been the second flashback Milo had of his early 7th grade years. Before the 4th of July, a friend of Milo's, Jimmy, bought his yearbook. Milo had known Jimmy since his Sunday school days and hung with him and ditched him at Seawood, and in fact, they both made the same communion at the same time. Jimmy was supposed to go to William Jetson's for middle school, but they did not have enough room. Jimmy ended up going to Pecan Meadows. Now Jimmy did go to Kinsale, which was why he knew Ella to begin with. One day, when looking through the yearbook, Milo looked and saw a picture of a mirror in the book. Frankly, Milo did not even know if Amira even went to Pecan Meadows before seeing the book. This was the first time that Milo had actually seen Amira's name in print and actually remembered it. She looked very pretty in the picture. Milo started to feel some nostalgia for this first semester of 7th grade, which had been going on for a while, since seeing that luxury box and the yacht club and Matt's and Emma's. Milo then became dedicated to make sure that 6th grade did not repeat itself in his freshman year of high school. Milo knew well how much 5th grade had repeated itself that previous year. Then there was this majestic vision in the room. There is an insignificant neighborhood in the middle of a mighty metropolis on a dreamless and cold winter's night. Stars are crossing the horizon, gazing on this light in a maternity ward, resting on their fate and hope of the greater Rust Belt region. Then a host of morning stars travel over the ward and glimpse a baby born of woman. The gathering of the morning stars travels over the region to a small child sleeping in a crib, not much older than the newborn, to proclaim these tidings. The rest of the region had been long asleep, little knowing that moments from now, the little girl had been destined to rescue that region from the powers of greed and pride. Then there is a great song of thanksgiving to the one who sent the blessings, with the stars declaring the glory of the Most High One. Yuriyama's vision and the Charism story. Yuriyama summoned Melendel, Alexander, Kashmir, and Huzisha over a horrible vision he had seen. Yuriyama had been trying to figure out what this meant, and had spoken with a number of Sophonims who had no success in understanding. Meeting Melendel would be the key to understanding what this all meant. Here was the vision. This vision involves a phoenix known as Tithonus, who feared combustion and sought a way to avoid this. Tithonus remembered how the aging process was before, and did not want to go through this again. For months, he sought out a legendary alchemical stone from the Fountain of Youth that could produce this serum, preserving youth so long as frequently drank. This time, Tithonius had no luck in finding the stone, and grew old and burst into flames. For several years, Tithonius had lived in prosperity until one day, starting to age, a Hypocordo offered Tithonius the stone, but at a terrible cost. By this time, Tithonius aged significantly, and what he did not understand was the serum could not reverse youthfulness. The more Tithonius drank the serum, he started to lose his feathers, and his skin started to become white and like a burned texture. By this time, Tithonius became very possessive of the stone, and developed the ability to breathe fire. Tithonius started becoming a monster who would breathe fire on anyone who came near his stone. Eventually, Tithonius saw what he had become, and disposed of the stone. Soon enough, Tithonius exploded in flames, and his ashes were scattered all over the place and would take a long time to find before being able to be reborn again. Then the charism in the spirit of Gregory of Nyssa and Saint Clement of Alexandria and Blessed Heinrich Suso showed up. They explained that they had overheard the dilemma and understood something going on. The Clement charism told the story of six theological schools in early Christianity: the Pharisee and the Accuser. This was how the story went. In the days that the Messiah was on earth, there had been a group of clergy known as Pharisees, under the power of a great serpent known as the Accuser. They had been quite a proud and judgmental people, who had been the ones to call for the death of the Messiah. When the Messiah rose and their greatest Pharisee, Paul, became an apostle, the Accuser left and the temple fell. 4 of the schools of Alexandria, Antioch, Caesarea, and Edessa believed that all were worthy of the kingdom. One school, Ephesus, was undecided, while the Latin school of Carthage believed that only a select few were worthy for the kingdom. The school of Carthage had been aligned with Roman politics and sought to integrate the kingdom of the Messiah with worldly kingdoms. They knew that the other schools outnumbered them, and the Accuser returned to their aid. This time, he placed in power a horrible king known as Justinian, who banned all theological schools except for the Carthaginian school. By this time, many had been sacrificed through burnings at the stake in the name of the Accuser. The Heinrich charism told the story of 6 medieval mystics who had slain 6 heads off of the Accuser, whose names were Blessed Heinrich Suso, Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Julian Norwich, Hildegard Bingen, Meister Eckhart, and John Duns Scotus. With the 14th century Reformation, the Accuser had grown more powerful at the hands of the Genevan Reformation and spread their iconoclasm and terrorism to Scotland, the Netherlands, and eventually the New World. There had also been some noble groups such as the Anabaptists, the Quakers, and early evangelicals who traveled to the New World and brought a spirit of religious tolerance. The Gregory charism then tells the rest of the story of the Accuser's return to the evangelicals and the Wahhabist movement. In the 18th century, the teachings of Muhammad ibn al-Wahhab spread throughout the Middle East, putting an end to the noble Golden Age. Meanwhile, in the 20th century, the Accuser appeared to many disciples of Arminius, Pelagius, Calvin, Fiddy, Darby, Savonarola, and the Order of Men's. The spirit of freedom amongst the Baptists began to decay, while the spirit of tolerance in the Muslim world became diluted. Many skeptics, priests, philosophers, and prophets had swiped the numerous heads off the accuser. A new one was needed, and comes from the charge of Melendel. Melendel, Kashmir, Alexander, Huzisha, and Yoriyama were a bit confused with the charism's testimonies. The Heinrich Suso charism explained that this may be the kind of purification needed to train the charge. Kashmir then became horrified when remembering how his charge seemed not to want to go through the dark transition, which could be very dangerous. The 4th of July weekend and the wedding. Milo's 4th of July weekend consisted in throwing a party at the Biancatello's house. The morning before the party, Uncle Wayne took Lydia, Milo, Grandpearl, and his family on his new speedboat through the lake known as his kids' college in tuition. All the kids got a turn with tubing, and many had incidents of falling off the tubes due to the high speed. Frankly, everyone had some laughs about this. While tubing, Milo had a version of O Come Emmanuel from the Mormon Tabernacle stuck in his head while on the tube. At the party, all of Ray's brothers and sisters and Grandpa Tony showed up, with the exception of Uncle Mike, Aunt Jackie, and Emma, and Aunt Diane, as Uncle Mike and Aunt Jackie were in vacation in South Carolina, and Danielle was in labor. That summer, Jessie and Danielle were expecting their firstborn, Ashlyn, who was born on the 4th of July. Ben stayed back that year as he had an internship. Ben told Milo that Pravani was in his internship, but a lot more outgoing this time than she was when she was in elementary school back at St. Timothy's. Aunt Bertha, Uncle Wayne, his mother, Kyle, Kevin, Bruce, and Grandma Pearl were also at the party. On Saturday, Ray joined Milo and Lydia on Uncle Wayne's boat in the morning. At the evening, the Biancatellos went over to Grandma Pearl's as Uncle Wayne was hosting a cookout. Uncle Wayne told this hilarious story about that night about how his car had gotten stolen. According to the story, one morning Aunt Bertha was ready to go to work, only to find her car missing. Aunt Bertha called the workplace to tell them that her car had been stolen and that she would be unable to come in. Aunt Bertha's boss could not stop laughing at this news. They called the police and sought out some witnesses. The neighbor across the street admitted she heard the car leave at 1 a.m., but thought they were just going out for a drive. After weeks of the police being unable to find the car, the case was almost declared a lost cause, and the insurance company would pay for them to get a new car. Right before the cause was considered lost, the police called that they found the car and that the hooligans were arrested. The car had been in bad shape and needed to go in for repairs and had been quite old to begin with. The car was returned after the repairs were made and the back seats were loose. Uncle Wayne called to complain, and the mechanic on the line asked if the seats came like this when they bought the car. A few days later, Uncle Wayne called again and found out that this mechanic who fixed the car and asked about the loose seats was fired. On Saturday night, Milo had some strange dreams about the days before he started 6th grade, when he got a private orientation and coming home watching Looney Tunes Wile E. Coyote shorts while thinking about kindergarten. Not that it even really happened in the first place. Then the dream changed to Merle with a flying car, rescuing him and Steve from 2 home ec teachers let loose at the school, out to purge the students. Merle then takes Milo and Steve off to a secret hideout with some inside walls colored deep blue with stars painted over. That morning in church, the Biancatellos sat with Gran Patoni. Monsignor Warner broke the news that the parochial Victor would be leaving and that Father Nick would take his place. Then he also explained that the youth minister, Richard Esposito, was just offered a job at St. James High to teach full-time theology. At this had been the 4th of July weekend. The ending hymn was My Country 'Tis of Thee. That afternoon, Milo invited Steve over to his house. Steve had some news that Merle may be getting a job with Margaret's company. That afternoon, Steve asked Milo to talk to Alicia for him. Steve had been begging Milo for a long time to see Alicia since he saw her last during the past fall. That night, Milo had more nightmares based on Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Based on the chapter where Harry did not know how he would make it through his exams when Voldemort could be walking through the classroom any second. 2 summers ago, Rory and Lauren got engaged. Rory asked if Milo and Salvatore would be altar servers, and both accepted. This day was very near. The weekend before the wedding, the O'Malley's, 2 Biancatellos families, Gran Patoni, and the Filentinos went on a short vacation to Drake's Forest State Park, a few hours south of Cider Pond. This was the same place they had all gone to 2 summers ago. Last summer they did not go up due to Grandma Rosa being sick. At lunch, on the way to Drake's Forest, Aunt Michelle explained that Salvatore can no longer serve Mass as he had a basketball game. This was the biggest reason that Milo tended to do more things with Matt than Salvatore. Salvatore would often go through phases on and on of obsessing on certain things and becoming quite imbalanced. At this point in Salvatore's life, he could barely be very unreliable, and for him, sports unquestionably came first. Such was the case with the wedding, where Milo would have expected Salvatore to put a commitment to a family function and a cousin's wedding on higher priority than a basketball game. So what happened was Aunt Diane got Matt to serve in Salvatore's place. Lydia was scheduled to be a bridesmaid. Getting back to the vacation, Lydia ordered a shrimp salad from Burger King and was utterly disgusted. Then they were all off back to the road again. The 2 years ago that the whole family went was the summer before Milo started 7th grade and would be attracted to a mirror for the first time. That first evening, Milo was playing his new Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for his Game Boy Advance. This game's main melody constantly haunted Milo for years to come. The next day, when going on a hike, Milo started anticipating his freshman year being more so like 7th grade, as he remembered the same woods from 2 summers ago, and thought a little bit about his hiking trip to Sandusky. The further Milo got into the summer, the less appealing his memories of the 5th grade summer became. This national park reminded Milo of the Forbidden Forest, and the cabins reminded Milo of like some type of secret Harry Potter hangout. That night at the restaurant, Milo told Alicia about his friend Steve, as he had wanted Milo to talk to her for years. Alicia was a little freaked out that Steve had any interest in her. Milo explained that he saw her at that night when Aunt Marie and Grandpa Tony were over for dinner. This did not help his case out. Alicia then considered that Milo needs to find less strange friends. Milo then knew this was a lost cause, but did not exactly have high hopes, let alone care. That night, the kids were taken back to the dark maze, where Milo saw this as a perfect Voldemort hideout, and even said Voldemort's picking his nose here. Ray had to leave early as he had a business trip back down in Alabama. Then that afternoon, when they got back, Margaret, Lydia, and Milo got dinner with Grandma Pearl after picking Ginny up at an Italian restaurant. Then the weekend of Rory's wedding came. On Friday, with Milo's summer camp, they were taken fishing by invitation of an estate owner who let them use his private pond. That afternoon, Milo took a walk through the Jafaris and had no such luck. Frankly, Milo had not taken Ginny for too many walks so far that summer. Ray had just got back from his business trip in Alabama. They went out to dinner at an Italian restaurant and stopped at a toy store to pick up a Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's game for the Game Boy Advance Milo wanted so badly. The morning before the wedding, Milo and Ray cut Grandpa Tony's grass and found that Aunt Marie and Alicia were already in town. Aunt Marie had come in the night before as she was doing a reading. At 12:30, Ray dropped Milo off at St. Timothy's, to which he proceeded to the sacristy. Milo had found Jesse, Julian, Rob, and Ben over by the organ, as they were the groomsmen. Milo ended up waiting in the sacristy for a good amount of time. Soon enough, Matt arrived, and then the priest. Both Milo and Matt shared in lighting the candles while the people were arriving in the church for the Mass. Being that neither the priest nor Matt had ever assisted a service at St. Timothy's, Milo had most of the leadership roles. Milo, Matt, and the priest congregated to the altar before the wedding team began the procession. Then the procession began and the wedding took place. The processional piece used was Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, which was also used at Jesse's wedding almost 4 years ago. The piece used at the entrance of the bride was Canon in D, which is the stereotypical wedding piece. The ending piece was Trumpet Voluntary, which had been the processional at Ray and Margaret's wedding. Milo only knew from their video. After the service, the reception took place. As far as receptions went, there were no surprises. Milo liked having his moment of glory, when everyone commended him and Matt for doing a good job as altar servers. Milo saw people like the Schumachers, and they even asked him to be in Courtney's wedding in the upcoming next summer. Milo had also seen other relatives like Aunt Adrienne, Uncle Pietro, and then sat with all his younger cousins like Alicia. At the wedding, Milo told Alicia about something he found out with Steve having a fascination with Peter Rabbit stories. Alicia considered this quite pathetic. That night, the O'Malleys left right after the wedding, as Matt had to serve Mass back in New Seneca the next morning. Milo thought this a bit odd, considering that they always switched with someone else when they had matters inside a pond to attend to. The next day, Milo and Ray went to the early Mass and saw Grandpa Tony. After Mass, the three went out to breakfast at McDonald's. Lydia and Margaret went to the 9:30 Mass that the parochial vicar who was leaving had presided at. After Mass was a farewell social, and the church clapped for him. The priest had given a sermon about leaving from his last assignment and visiting a patient in the hospital who had complained that he was leaving, but saying, "Oh, this father so-and-so is leaving," but did not recognize him. Alongside, Milo was in his last week of summer camp. On Monday, Milo got invited by Steve to go to the small amusement park past Sosawego with him, Merle, and Doris. This had been a year from their last trip to the Imagination Stations. When they arrived at the park, they found it closed due to the rainstorm. So Merle drove them all back to Cider Pond, and they went to SeaWorld instead. Frankly, this had been more fun, as the other park had been on decline for several years, and had some pretty dull rides to begin with. Departure plans. Back in Londinium, the Kobolds were preparing for a discreet departure from Atlantica. Frankly, they did not want to be noticed by anyone, nor have any elaborate sending-offs. Elrich had bragged about his plans to get these quick alliances done and get an early agreement to get into the temple area. Limerd was still not keen on going and complained about leaving Londinium. Yoshiahu had been pushing the kobolds to read the book of advice the kobolds gave to Erondin. Elrich took the request quite lightly and chose not to read the book over. The only thing Elrich really cared about was getting the crest Josephus had, as it reminded him of the temple. Underneath this bravado, Elrich really feared failure. Elrich remembered all too well when the Dustonians had too much prominence in Londinium, and how much they made the war against the trolls seem like a huge failure. One evening at dusk, the kobolds departed Bluebells quite discreetly, looking back at their headquarters and a last look at the cliffs of Pedmontis. They quietly walked through the districts of Londinium late at night until reaching the city limits. By this time, the kobolds got over the border into some stony pathways near the mountains. For the next weeks, until they were scheduled to arrive in Atlantica, the kobolds made camp in the mountains. Limerd was still trying to implore the kobolds to turn back and making the same arguments that the Atlanteans did not want them there in the first place. Iohannes shushed Limerd as he did not want to draw any attention to them. The kobolds ended up making a pretty large tent city in the mountains, and knew that this would not be so easy to hide. Every morning before dawn, they took down the tents, and different groups stuck to different regions of the tent. The rest of the summer. One Friday later, Milo had a private orientation with Cider Pond High School and got a tour of the school. Milo felt even more uneasy after visiting the school, and the prospects of starting high school were not so overly appealing now. Possibly because the time was coming much closer than Milo cared to admit. The lady given the tour explained the many differences between high school and middle school, such as earlier start times, different classes every 2 days, and how the lunch systems worked. Students were not assigned to eat based on their grades, but was divided into 4 periods, and who the students ate lunch with depended on what time slot the teacher had. Otherwise, this was still a foreign facility that did not feel much like a home to Milo. After orientation, Milo had attended a pizza party for his final day of the summer camp. That evening, Milo and Ray mowed Grandpa Tony's grass, and they ordered another pizza. The only thing Milo was thinking of how at least his upcoming vacation to Florida would distract him from thinking about school. On Sunday, the Biancatellos left for Tampa. Margaret was able to get this trip because the resort that hosted her work gave her a great deal on rooms. The Biancatellos arrived at the Cider Point Airport in the late morning, which was quite easy to navigate compared to larger airports. Once they boarded a plane, they got a last look at Cider Point area before flying into Detroit. The Detroit airport reminded Milo slightly of the Toledo Imagination Station, which made him not feel so positive about these memories. This was frankly a long day in the airport and a 2-hour flight into Tampa. Milo felt exactly the same way when he arrived in Tampa as he had when he arrived the first time. That night, the Biancatellos ate at Sonny's barbecue. Frankly, Sonny's barbecue made Milo think of the Country Bear Jamboree back in Disneyland. No, Disney World, sorry about that. The first day, Milo felt a bit out of place in Tampa and could not believe that he was still in the United States. For lunch, they got Thai for the first time. Milo ordered duck. Then they stopped at a drugstore, which reminded Milo of being in 5th grade and the Hogwarts Express for some strange reason. Possibly it reminded Milo of a drugstore when he was reading the Harry Potter books back in 5th grade. Then they got Italian for dinner at a supposedly renowned Italian restaurant. The next day, the Biancatellos went to Busch Gardens. So far, this had been Milo's favorite outing. Milo's favorite area was the Morocco area, Timbuktu and Egypt area, as they most strongly reminded Milo of the Middle East. For the most part, Milo and Lydia went on some rides together and only got on one fight. They went on a water ride and Milo saw a girl who resembled Roxana. They also went on a safari ride, which reminded Milo of the Indy 500 with the Runcorns years back. Milo also bought a picture from one of the roller coaster cameras. Otherwise, things were going quite well that day. On one occasion, they ate at a restaurant and kept having to move tables due to bugs. Milo got a bit agitated and asked how many more times are we gonna have to move. And other parts of the park reminded Milo of Roller Coaster Tycoon, particularly the expansion editions. The next day, the Biancatellos went to the beach during the day and Chili's for dinner. The drive through Tampa had been quite a nightmare. This city was overwhelmingly big and traffic was everywhere. Milo got a fajita pita at Chili's. Then on Thursday, the Biancatellos went to the water park, Adventure Island. That morning at Krispy Kreme, Milo had a flashback to his trip to Sandusky 2 years ago when they stopped for donuts on the way up to the place. After lunch, they went to the Science Center, which proved to be a massive disappointment, compared to the imagination station. This science center charged for everything, and Ray complained that none of the attractions could be used even though they paid admission. On their last day, the Biancotellos went to the aquarium in the morning, which reminded Milo of the Toledo Aquarium. That evening, Gino, who is a friend of Ray's, invited them over for the afternoon, bought some lunch and took them out to dinner. Towards the end, Milo started getting quite anxious, knowing that he would have to fly the next day. This made Milo like flying even less, as he remembered the trip down to Florida being quite overwhelming. After returning from vacation, Milo went on his second Cedar Point trip with his youth group. This would be the last activity that Richard Esposito would schedule, as he was taking the job at St. James Cathedral High School. As for the day, this was not as much fun as the year before. Milo saw a ride that he remembered waiting in line for, and thinking he was seeing Minuet, which he was remembering from the year before. During the day, Milo had this unshakable uneasiness that he just did not understand. Maybe it was just Milo knowing that he would be starting high school soon. For the day, Milo was with Richard's group and some other kids he knew from youth group. At Cedar Point, Milo heard the song You Can't Hurry Love on the radio. Towards the end, Milo bought a Superman ice cream cone at one of the ice cream shops in the park. This had been a bittersweet moment, as Richard was a great youth minister, and Milo would never get to enjoy the activities that the high schoolers did. After the trip, he thanked all of them for his years of service, and one of the kids gave him a big hug. Rich promised to be back to chaperone with the youth group in the future, and threatened that if anyone was mean to the new youth minister that he would give them a whooping. That night, after Cedar Point, Milo had some strange dreams about visiting the Rumcorns, Ella swimming in the ocean, and starting high school. In the dream, Milo had been so distraught about starting school that he called his old crush Ellen, who had been pregnant with twins. As for that day, Milo was back at Aunt Jane's and was playing with Sylvester. Eustace and an obnoxious neighborhood girl gave Milo a hard time, as they thought he was playing too rough with Sylvester. Now Milo knows that Sylvester likes to play rough and was asking him to. Sylvester was only 5 at the time and quite a feisty little guy. Lydia had tried to get Milo to listen to the two out of convenience. That evening, Ray's advice was that if 3 people are saying something is problematic, it probably is. Milo did not particularly care for such stupid rules of thumb, and thought that it was just 3 people who were acting stupid. That Friday and Saturday night, the Biancotellos had a condo on the lake that Margaret got through work. They went down to the condo on Friday night and ordered a pizza, but went home by 11 p.m. as they weren't really prepared for a night. That Saturday, the Biancatellos spent more time at the condo and at the beach area, including the night. They even brought Ginny along to the condo, and Lydia brought Emily for the night. For dinner, they ate at Stacy's Retro Diner. That night, Milo fell asleep watching some mystery movie and then woke up in the middle of the night. Then, that morning, Milo had to serve Mass, and Ray took him to church at St. Timothy's on the other side of town. Then Milo and Ray returned to the condo. That afternoon, the Biancatellos had Ray's company picnic at Seawooden. This time, being back at Seawooden didn't feel quite as glorious as his school picnic or going back with Doris and Merle. That Sunday night, the Biancatellos stopped back at the house, picked up some clothes, and drove Milo and Lydia to New Seneca to spend a few days with the O'Malleys. When they arrived, Milo told the O'Malleys all about his recent trip to Tampa. After Ray and Margaret left, Aunt Marie took the kids out for frozen yogurt. That first night had probably been the most euphoric of the trip. The first few days had been the most fun. On Monday morning, Aunt Marie made pancakes for breakfast. That evening, the O'Malleys took Milo and Lydia back to Chili's for dinner. Milo had noticed that Alicia had been a bit off. Milo had suspected that she was really just nervous about starting high school, but she talked like she was all excited about this and could handle it. Yet there was some red flag Milo could not put his finger on. The whole time, Alicia insisted that Milo find a new friend besides Steve. On Wednesday morning, Milo woke up by some off-putting dreams. Milo first dreamt about a funeral where he first saw Mira and Mazya's birthday. Then Milo dreamed that a church cantor escorted him to the airport for a family vacation. That Wednesday, Milo had started to become more anxious about starting high school in a few weeks, and bummed out that the summer had gone by so quickly. That afternoon, Aunt Marie took the kids to the New Seneca Mall. This was the same mall that the Biancatellos visited on their first visit. Milo had been utterly distracted and could only think about how his life was all changing. Milo feared that history was going to repeat itself exactly like it had in 6th grade. On Thursday, the O'Malleys came in town for Milo's birthday party, and hence the end of summer picnic. On Thursday, the O'Malleys came in town for the end of summer bash. On the way up, Milo felt more uneasy when talking with Matt about his airplane trip to and from Tampa. Now, Tiberius had fallen asleep, and Matt was talking about how cute he seemed. That night, they went over to Grandpa Tony's and then to church for the Assumption Mass, along with Aunt Diane. In church, the organist Jorge was playing the Schubert version of Ave Maria on the organ. Then the opening hymn was, Immaculate Mary. Then the offertory was Sing of Mary, and that mass was led by Monsignor Warner. The ending hymn was Hail Holy Queen enthroned above. After church, Ray stopped over at Grandpa Tony's as Margaret was on her way home from a business meeting, but stuck in the Detroit airport due to an electric outage on the Great Lakes. Margaret would not be able to get back until the next morning, and she had to spend the night in the airport. Milo and Lydia had one final dinner with the O'Malleys, Grandpa Tony and Aunt Diane at a little Italian place. Now at dinner they started talking a bit about Milo's grandparents Clarence and Maple Carroll, and got quite a laugh that she goes by Maple. Then Milo got a disgusting seafood sub. After dinner, Aunt Diane dropped Milo and Lydia off back at their own house. Now Aunt Diane was telling them a little more about the wedding and how Milo did how they both did such a good job, sir, with their roles. Then, when they got home, they saw Ginny for the first time, who seemed quite small compared to Tiberius. That night, Milo and Lydia were a bit off, thinking about Margaret being stuck in the airport, and were a little creeped out. Milo had this song Joseph Dearest stuck in his head, this particular choral version, and had all the stuff rolling through his head, like starting high school and leaving the O'Malleys, and how a couple years ago at this time the O'Malleys had just arrived in Cider Pond, and how Alicia seemed much more pleasant. On Friday morning, Margaret got home and took Milo and Lydia to Seawood to meet with the O'Malleys and Filantino's. Before leaving, Milo had been watching Harry Potter and the Sorcerer of Stone, and got haunted by this scene where Harry was reading the Mirror of Erised in some type of Welsh. Now, frankly, when it came to the park, Milo felt exactly the same like he did at Seawood 3 years ago, before starting middle school. Now, being at Soaptown was not too anything special. As for their birthday luncheon, it was about the same. At the park, Milo did not feel like this was quite the glory that he experienced with the school picnic. At the park, Milo noticed that Lily was hanging around with some of Ray's cousins' grandkids. Now, they did not really have a long day at Seawood, and had to leave after the roller coaster, as Margaret had been pretty tired from her night at the airport. After coming home, Milo swam in the pool and just thought about the week before, which had seemed so long ago, when he was serving mass and at the condo. Milo could just not comprehend how he had so little anxiety and now felt utterly helpless. Then, the next morning, Milo was invited to the mall with Steve, and he ran into Sean and his oldest sister, who was meeting up with some of her new creepy friends. This made Milo even more apprehensive about starting high school, seeing what kind of people they might have. The birthday party did not go much better, as it rained and everyone left early. The O'Malleys even left Cider Pond that night. Milo had been pretty disappointed, as he knew this end of summer party was always a hit, where Ray built the bonfire, which lasted well into the night. That evening, Salvatore and Gianni watched Ernest Scared Stupid with Milo, after everyone left and it was still quite rainy. On Milo's birthday, they got Chinese for lunch, and then Margaret took Milo to Michael's to pick out some craft supplies for a project he was working on. This started reminding Milo of 7th grade. When he got back, he took another swim in the pool, but knew that he had a orientation in the morning. On the day after Milo's birthday, he had one more orientation before starting school. Before walking into school, Henry caught up with Milo and Margaret. Henry acted all nice to Margaret, telling her all about his boring summer. Margaret asked Milo why he never befriended that boy. Milo explained that he had not really been so nice last year, and that he was really a jerk who slandered him. Upon walking in, Margaret and Milo saw Minyu. Frankly, Milo was not all that excited to see Minyu. However, Milo was quite pleased to see Ella, whom he thought looked very pretty that day. Milo also noticed many unfamiliar faces, including a Pashtun girl who resembled Nusha. Milo met his science teacher for the upcoming year, who seemed pretty nice, and found touring the school for a 4th time gave him more closure. Frankly, Milo was a lot calmer that last week of vacation than he had been over the last few days at the O'Malleys. At the orientation, Milo also saw Doris and Steve. Doris had complained about Steve wanting to leave and no interest in finding his classes. The next day, Milo and Lydia went with Denise, Seamus and Charlie to a sports park, which they had gone to the summer before with Merle, and which Milo had gone to with Merle and Steve. At the park, Milo started to fantasize that this upcoming high school freshman year would be a lot better than his 6th grade year, and wanted to make sure that this would be so. Being in that park reminded Milo of his spring when he went with Ray a couple times golfing at this place. Otherwise, that week, Milo was still not so bummed out about having to return to school, and finding that he got some closure. On the Friday, the last Friday before first school was about to start again, Ray took Milo and Lydia to see Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man, the first one. That weekend, Lydia, Grandma Pearl, and Margaret went on a mother and daughter's weekend, which Ella also attended with her mother. Now Grandma Pearl put some pictures of Ella and the group.